Good evening. Welcome to tonight's shiur. Today is Thursday of Parshas Matos-Masei, and today's shiur is sponsored by Rav Mendel and Mrs. Freda Kahati, née Davidov, and this is in honor of their newborn baby boy. The birth should be Monday, B'shot over Mislachas, and so we wish them Mazel Tov and Tzach Nachas. It's still daytime, so we can say together Hesaf in Torah, Tefillah, and Tzedakah. So we can say Kapitel Chof for the welfare of the hostages and for Eden and Yisrael and Chol Mokim Shehem. So I'll say Kapitel Chof, we'll put in Tzedakah, and then we'll start the shiur. I'm not saying Mr. David, Ya Ancho Dayan Levi Yitzchok Raskin, Hashem Elehei Yaakov, Yishlach Ezracha Mikodesh Amitzia Yisadecha. Yizkor kol min teisecha v'iloscha yudash nesela. Yitem l'chol chila v'alvecha v'chol atzasecha yimale n'rannen da v'shosecha v'shem Eloheinu nidgoy yimale al yanai kol mish alisecha. Atu yadati ki eishi al yimeshicha yanehu mishmi kodshoy v'givuros yesha yimina ela v'rechev v'ela v'asusim nachnu b'shem Adonai Eloheinu nazkir hei makoro v'nafolo v'nachnu kamnu v'anis eidod v'dinoi Yeshua melech yaninu yen korenu. Okay. So let's go to our first question. Someone was asking me at last week's Sedra. We have in the beginning of the Sedra, we have where Shem says to Pinchas, Hineni noisin loi as brisi sholem. But the word sholem is spelled with shin lamed vov mem, but the vov is split. So not necessarily in all the Chomoshim, I was looking around, but in Sefer Torah, so the letter Vav here is split. As I mentioned earlier, as a bocher in Melbourne, we once, we took out the Sefer Torah and we saw there's a split Vav. So we rolled up the Sefer Torah, put it back in the Aron Kodesh, took out another one. The next one also had a split Vav. And so then we realized that that's by design rather than by mistake. Okay, so we've got here this split Vav. The person was asking me that he's seen in different Sefer Torah, different forms, whether the split is halfway, as you can see on the screen here, or the split is lower down, as you might see in some Sefer Torah. He's asking, is there any mesorah in Chabad about that? And also he's asking, well, if you take the Rov of Shalom and split it in half, so the top half seems to be like a yud, and then that leaves you with the word like shalim. Is there something significance in that? So let's explore this a little bit. So first of all, we have a Gemara in Kiddushin, which says, Hineni noisen loyas brisi shalom, kashu shalom v'lo kashu chaser. The kahuna is given to a kohen who is intact, who is got all the faculties, etc. No damage, no blemishes. So then the Gemara asks, "Well, shalom kasiv." The word shalom means complete, but it's written shalom. Omar Rav Nachman vov de shalom ketiyohi. The vov of the letter shalom, the vov of the word shalom is an incomplete letter. And therefore, it lends to the pshat of reading it sholem, which means complete. And therefore, that's a remez to the kohen having to be intact without any mumin. So that's one where we see already this vov ketiyo, which means a split vov, a cut short vov, is mentioned in the Gemara. Then go to other sources. So here we have in the Torah Shlema, Shalom Vov Katano. So B'shviloi hineni noisin loi v'loi la'ache. As brisi Shalom Matonos Shlema. So he's being given the word Shalom with a Vov as if it were missing. I'm giving him a full gift. That's a medrash. And then we have in another source, also in the Torah Shlema, the Vov of, from Rabbeinu Yoel, the Vov of Shalom is split in half. Shenoila demohul, that to say that Pinchas was born already circumcised, like we have in the word of Malki Tzedek Melech Sholem, and he's alluding to a medrash which says about Malki Tzedek Melech Sholem, so we have here drushim on the word Sholem, as if it were Sholem intact. Then we have the Rekeach, who takes it even with the Yud. Sholim. The Gematria, Pinchas Noilad Moho. So the Rekeach was brilliant in Gematrias. He was one of the Balei HaTosfos, late Balei HaTosfos, I believe. So he shows how the word Sholim, which is 380, equals the Gematria of Pinchas Noilad Moho. I didn't work it out. I trust him. So we have here remez to the Sholim, which also means intact. Having said all that, then he's asking a bit more detail about how the Vov is split. So there is a sefer, I've mentioned this in the past, and there's a sefer which is a Talmud of the Tzemach Tzedek, and he mentions it's mentioned in Hayom Yom a couple of times. There's a sefer dedicated to concept of Sofrus, so it's called Mishnah Savrohom, and in chapter 31 he calls it Shar HaSholem, and it's focusing on the word Sholem, the split Vav in Sholem, and he says there are various opinions how the letter is split. Is it that it's a small Vav? Is it that the Vav becomes mamish like a Yud? Is it that the Vav is a regular Vav, but it's got the foot is a bit shorter? Is it that the Vav is split in half? That the upper part looks like a Yud, and together with the lower part, it looks like a Vav. And then he gives other opinions. So we have here a variety of opinions. So we have this, Gemara says it's a Vav K'tio, exactly how it is done. So we have actually several shittas, and what my recollection from seeing the Sefer Torah is that it's like a shortened Vav, not split in half, but split lower down. It is bedoiching, it's counted as a Vav, but there are, as you see, there's the various different mesorahs. Is there a mesorah in Chabad? I'm not sure. That you'd have to ask Chabad Sofer. It's right. So Rabbi Safran is pointing out that that gematria, he's worked it out. So again, let's go back to that gematria from the Rekeach, Pinchas Noilad Mohul. So you're saying that it is actually 379, but Im HaKoilol, it becomes it's 380. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on. So now we have one of our regular participants in the shiur, somewhere in Europe. So he's asking about use of this swing for his children, I presume, and in relation to using it on Shabbos. So what's the question? On Shabbos, we're not allowed to climb a tree, and we're not allowed to lean on a tree. You wouldn't. Let's say if you wanted to, in your garden, and you wanted to take off your jacket and hang it on a branch of the tree, that wouldn't be allowed. If the children are playing with a ball and it landed on a bush, you'd have a problem of taking it off the bush because so there is, but then the halacha is that tzedodin are osur, tzididei tzedodin are permitted. If it's like 2 steps removed, then it is permitted. So let's read that halacha in Shulchan Aruch in Siman Shin Lamed Vov. Also lishtamish betzididei ha'ilon. Not allowed to use the sides of the tree. Alva betzididei tzedodin, the sides of the sides. In other words, 2 steps removed, you would be allowed to. So a ladder leaning on the tree, you wouldn't be allowed to go up that ladder because you are using the sides of the tree. In other words, the ladder leaning on the tree, the side of the tree. If there were a peg fitted on the tree, screwed onto the tree, and then the ladder is leaning on that peg, then you would be allowed to go up that ladder because that's called tzidei tzedodin. If you have a hook hanging from a tree, and on the tree, on that hook is hanging a basket, so then to put stuff, to use that stuff from the basket, that would be okay. To hang the basket itself wouldn't be okay. Another important point, though, is when we're talking about 2 steps removed. So in Piskei Teshuvos, he points out a very logical thing, and that is, let's say you're not allowed to sit on a wagon which is hooked up, harnessed to an animal, because that's called tzedodin of the animal. Now, the wagon is made of a seat, and the seat has got connected to the sides, and on the side there's going to be a bar, and the bar has got a ring at the end, etc. And then there's going to be a strap. So there are various stages between yourself and the animal, and still you're not allowed to sit in the carriage pulled by an animal. The explanation is because all the pieces of the carriage, the wagon, are all considered one entity. The nails and the hooks, etc., they're all considered one entity. So that brings us back to the question here. Let's go back to our swing. So you can go to any garden center probably, or toy shop. You can buy these swings, and so you got the round seat, and then you got the blue rope. So the blue rope is not considered a step removed from the seat because it's all one unit. That's understood. Now, so the regular unit is, let's say, about 2 meters long, and that rope, and it hangs 2 meters from wherever it's suspended. But here it was suspended from the tree. So what they did, they got separate rope and suspended it from the tree at a higher stage, a couple of meters, and then at a given level, they are connecting as you can see in the middle picture, connecting the indigenous rope of the swing with the extra rope, which is hanging straight from the tree. Now, are we going to call this tzedodin or tzidei tzedodin? Can we say that because the rope, there's the rope of the swing, there's the rope from the tree, and they are 2 things which are connected to one another? So is it 1 stage or 2 stages? I didn't really feel confident. So from a younger man, he's asking me that it should be in a way there's no chashash. You could, or you look at this and you'd say, what are you talking about? It's 1 swing which is hanging suspended from the tree. So I wasn't comfortable to say it's not a problem at all. So what I suggested to him is that at the bottom of the orange and black rope should add a horizontal bar, like a trapeze. And then he will hang the hooks with the turquoise, whatever string, to hang it from that horizontal bar. And there will be clearly 2 stages removed. Will be the orange rope, will be the tzedodin, and then the next and the trapeze, and then the swing will be hanging from the trapeze. Therefore, it's considered tzedodin, and he will be able to entertain his children on Shabbos afternoon without any chashash. Let's move on to the next question. So one of our regular listeners has a problem of sometimes waking up in the middle of the night. I'm sure many of us do. And this person is saying that she would like to say a couple of chapters of Tehilim. Doesn't want to say Birchas and everything. She wants to go back to sleep. But whilst there's a way to say a couple of, that's one of the ways to fall asleep, is to learn something or to do something which the Yetzer Torah wants you to do. So then that helps the other side wants you to fall asleep. Okay, so she wants to say a couple of chapters of Tehilim, but then to start saying Birchas haTorah and everything is going to be a bit of too much. And so she's just read a book rather than saying Tehilim. But so there's a famous story, I think it was Reb Shoel Baruch, who used to, when he would get up in the middle of the night, he would make a point of learning something and then going back to sleep. And he explained that when his neshama goes back after his short excursion in the middle of the night, they're going to in the Milo, they're going to ask, what did you do? And she should just say, he said Ashiyotza. He wanted to learn something, but most of us are not on that madriga. You want to go back and fall asleep and to be able to be alert for the following day in good health. So this is the question. Can she say the Tehilim in the middle of the night without saying Birchas haTorah? So let's read in Shulchan Aruch in Hilchos Birchas haTorah, Mem Zayin, that he writes the following. Alter Rebbe writes the following. There are places, this is Nusach Ashkenaz, where they would say Birchas haTorah, not where we say it right after the brachas, the 18 brachas, whatever, but they say it later, just by Parshas Atomid. Earlier you have said various psukim, you've said Matoivu, you've said perhaps Hakedah, etc. They don't worry about that. Hoil ve'ein oimrim oisam derech tachanunim. Sorry, hoil ve'oimrim oisam derech tachanunim, ve'loi derech limud ukriya b'Torah. Since these psukim are being said in a form of supplication, rather than a form of study, of learning Torah, therefore it's not necessary to say Birchas haTorah. So according to this, to say Tehilim without Birchas haTorah, if you're saying it as a prayer rather than as learning, would be legitimate. It's preferable, more correct, to say Birchas haTorah earlier, right after the Birchas HaShachar, and which is indeed our minhag. But we're seeing here that there is room to be makel on this, and that's what you see here in Piskei Teshuvos. He writes mamash our situation, and a person who, when they wake up in the middle of the night to say some tefillahs and Tehilim, they can be makel as far as not having to say Birchas haTorah before doing so. It just struck me when I heard the reading of the Hayom Yom today after davening. So the Hayom Yom for Rov of Anash says that in learning, your devotion is to an object which you wish to understand, and you understand. When you daven, your devotion is to something which is higher than understanding. When you learn Torah, you are like a pupil in front of a Rebbe, in front of your teacher. In davening, you're like a child in front of your father. So it's a different relationship. And I think that would sum up the person saying Tehilim. They want to think about Hashem, but not that they're studying Tehilim as such. So there is room to be makel just to say the Tehilim without having to say Birchas haTorah. Let's move on to the next question. Very interesting. So it seems to be a rather very simple question. Someone's asking me, why do we have a velomar bרכו on a Friday evening and not on Yomtov? To clarify a little bit more. In our nusach, as in nusach all Chassidish nuschos, we have a piece of Zohar, which we say on Friday night at the end of Kabbalah Shabbos before Bרכו. So it starts off Kegavno, then there's a passage Rosa de Shabbos, and then that leads into Benhira de Anpin, and then we have Kaddish and then Bרכו. And it has in the Siddur, this is right from the Alter Rebbe, the first print, that if you're davening on your own, you should say the end of that ma'amar, of that passage in the Zohar, after Benhira de Anpin, you should say this passage of Velomar bרכו. Okay, so this is something which is unique to the Alter Rebbe Siddur. Now, I saw someone who's quoted that he saw this in the Siddur Shalom. So with Mechilas Kvoidoi, he saw a later print of the Siddur Shalom. I have in possession, I was given this for Yerusha of Mr. Teller, Alav Shalom, a Siddur from the year Tov Kuf Pei Vav. And there it does have exactly the same thing. But these are all after the Alter Rebbe. It's almost 200 years ago, but it's after the Alter Rebbe. Before the Alter Rebbe, you don't have anywhere where it has to say this passage of Velomar bרכו. So it is interesting. Before going to a bit more detail, we have here a letter of the Rebbe. The Rebbe says this is added to a letter, Michtov Kloli Prati, and the Rebbe says the following, that the passage of Velomar bרכו, if you're davening b'yechidus, you add the passage of Velomar bרכו. It doesn't matter whether you heard bרכו before. And he refers us to the Zohar, which you're going to look at in a moment. Velomar Bרכו begin lemiftach legabo bibracha. In order to open with a bracha. So just to explain what's going on here. So could be forgiven to think that this is a consolation prize. Someone who missed Bרכו, so then by Velomar Bרכו, it's making up what you missed. And therefore begs the question, why is there the option of, compensating for the missed Bרכו? Why is there that compensation available on Shabbos, not available on Yomtov? Because they're the same thing for the weekday. And that's a misunderstanding of what's going on here. It's not a compensation. As you can see, what we just saw from the Rebbe's letter, that even if you did answer Bרכו, but you are somehow behind the minyan, and when it comes to the end of Rosh Shabbos, you're davening alone, so then you should say Velomar Bרכו. Doesn't matter whether you're a page before or 5 pages, doesn't matter. When you're reading Kegavna and Rosh Shabbos, if you're not finishing off with actually saying Bרכו, then you should say the passage of Velomar Bרכו. So what is it? What is it about? And you see how the Rebbe refers to this with the limigin lemiftach legabo bivracha. So what's going on here is, you can look it up in the Zohar Daf Kuf Lamed Hey, talking about during the week comes Ma'ariv time. We start off with V'hu Rachum, and that's the V'hu Rachum has got to do with people getting malchus. It's in of dinim. The person would get malchus. They would say, as we do indeed Erev Yom Kippur, we say V'hu Rachum 3 times with the 39 malchus. I don't know whether I've discussed this in the past. I think I have. That there are shittas in Rishonim which say Makas Mardus, which is malchus for a violation of the Rabbanon, is 13 malchus, a third of the full malchus of 39. Because there's shlish lefonov, shnei lo shlishim la'achoyrov, and that's whereas malchus drabonon, according to some poskim, is 13 malchus. And it looks like it used to be a minute. People would sometimes volunteer to having malchus after a day's exposure to the clippers outside in the market, and that's the V'hu Rachum at the beginning of Ma'ariv. So it says in the Zohar not to say that on Friday night, because here is a moment where we've gone away from dinim, and it's a moment of elevation. Therefore, not to indulge in talking V'hu Rachum and in dinim. It's to go take the approach of bracha. And that's it. The Zohar goes into detail about that. The Bרכו of Friday night is like going into Shabbos with the inyan of bracha. That's something on those lines. As you see here, we've been disassociated from the Sitra Achra, so don't mention V'hu Rachum, we should got to with the Sitra Achra. Right. And so we have here a bit more detail. Es daiko, es is related to Ma'ale Shabbato. The Kitzer, it is here an inyan of going into Shabbos with the bracha, with the Hamavayrach. So if you are davening with the minyan, so you finish off Rosh Shabbos, and then you go in straight into Bרכו. If you're davening without the minyan, then we have to finish off the introduction to Ma'ariv. With the bracha, we say Velomar Bרכו. I just want to mull over this a little bit more and say the following: that the minhag Nusach Ashkenaz does not necessarily say Kaddish before Ma'ariv, because original Nusach Ashkenaz would go straight from Mincha into Ma'ariv, and therefore if you had a Kaddish after Mincha, and then go straight into Birchas Hashem HaMavoirach, start Ma'ariv. The Nusach Sfard Chassidische Nusach is a kind of in between, and so they don't have necessarily Mincha, Ma'ariv right after Mincha, so they say Shir HaMa'alos, and then they say a Kaddish. Then they say V'hu Rachum, and then Birchas Hashem HaMavoirach. So they don't have the Kaddish and the Bרכו coming together. The Alter Rebbe here follows Nusach Sfard, which just like by Yishtabach, it's Kaddish and then Bרכו. So the same thing at Ma'ariv, it's Kaddish and then Bרכו. That's the Alter Rebbe's introduction here into the Ashkenazic world, which wasn't followed and isn't followed by other Ashkenazi communities. So in order to say Kaddish, you have to have either a limud or a tefillah. So what is the limud which justifies the Kaddish? It's this limud of this piece of Zohar, and it's also a focus on the pasuk. The whole discussion of the Zohar is the echad lamaylo and the echad lamato. That's the introduction to that's the piece of that's a discussion of a pasuk. So it's Torah Shabbat Petaka, but that is justifying the saying of the Kaddish and then going straight from the Kaddish into the Bרכו. I'm wondering whether that, I have to think of it a bit more, whether that is the explanation why the Alter Rebbe has this Velomar Bרכו and not in other nuschos. Think about this. The other nuschos who don't have to have a Kaddish here, so then they can go finish off the shiur de Anpin, Velomar Bרכos Hashem Mevorach. Done. They can just say Velomar Bרכos Hashem Mevorach, whereas according to the Alter Rebbe, where we need to have a Kaddish here. So we stop with, we don't say Velomar as the Polish Nusach does. We have a Kaddish and then Bרכו. I'm just wondering whether the fact that Alter Rebbe therefore had to also introduce when you're davening B'yochid to say this whole passage, whether that's also got to do with the different structure which he has in relation to the Amiras HaKaddish. To think about it a bit more. Let's move on. So here's a question. A lady went to Bournemouth and she is not so comfortable to go back on the train. So she called a taxi, a car service to pick her up, to come from London to Bournemouth, to pick her up and then drive her from Bournemouth back to London. There's, for those who don't know where Bournemouth is, it's about 2.5 hours drive from London. Part of her husband was that she's one of the things she's concerned about yichud, and as a result, therefore she ordered the car to arrive 6 o'clock, let's say, something, so it will be daytime during the travel, and in that way she felt there's not a worry of yichud, cars visible to the outside. The driver arrived an hour and a half late, and by the time the driver arrives, she feels that they're going to be driving into the night, and so she cancels the drive. So the driver has driven 2.5 hours one way, going back empty-handed the return journey, and of course the driver is furious, and the employer of the driver is insisting on payment. And here's the question: is she obliged to pay for this driver, or is she able to say, well, you didn't come on time, and consequently I wasn't able to go with you because of my concerns, and therefore I do not have to pay? So I looked around and I see that in Piskei Choshen he talks about this, that if a worker did not come on time, well, let's say a slightly different variation. He talks later also about taxes, but let's say you didn't come on time, so the employer went and hired a different worker. So if someone lays off a worker at a very short notice, so it says the Mishnah, and says is it Torah, whatever. Says the Mishnah, you can the worker has reason to be upset. That's as much as he can do. But if the worker came late, and therefore the employer had to employ someone else, so you aren't even entitled to a bragus. What do you want from the employer? How does he know? He doesn't know whether you're going to come out at all. And therefore, his commitment to you as an employer to employee is a betorah, because coming on time is part of the contract. And so therefore, by turning up late, so there's a violation of contract. and therefore you can't have any complaints. If he was already kind of in middle of the work, and then for some reason there was a delay, that's a different story. That may be more sway in favor of the worker. But what I'm seeing here is that even without the whole cheshbon of yichud being etc., but if you call a driver to arrive at a particular time, and he arrives, I don't know what the story was. Yeah, and I told the woman, I'm not going to pass it for you to speak to someone who's more of a mumche in Yone Mominus, and he should hear both sides. But afterwards, I was looking into it. The interesting situation that you see here, that keeping time, especially to such a degree, is if it's with a couple of minutes would be reasonable. But if it's an hour and a half, especially when it was making all the difference for her going home during day or night, then she has grounds to have cancelled him. And yes, it's sorry for the driver, but yeah, she's in her rights to cancel him. Let's move on. Very, very interesting question. Now, there is a website called Chabad.org. And one of the features of Chabad.org is you have a section of halacha times. So you can select any place in the world, kind of thing, and they're going to tell you what time is Alas HaShachar and Chatzos, etc. So it came up the discussion about a place called Samoa and American Samoa. Then these are two separate islands which are near one another. And the question was about how to define when is Shabbos. So to explain, we have what's called the international date line, and on either side of the international date line, it's going to be one day. One side is going to be Monday, the next day the other side is going to be Tuesday. So if you look in this map over here, so you can see in the green circled area, so the dotted line is the international date line, where it goes between Alaska and Vladivostok, Bering Straits. It kind of does a bit of a swerve to the west, and then to include some islands on the American side, and it goes straight down, and then lower down and parallel to, is it Fiji or somewhere around there, there's a bit of a movement around there of this line, and just around there are the islands of Samoa. And what's very interesting is that Samoa, as you can see on the map, is not that far from Australia, and there's the Samoa and the American Samoa. The American Samoa is a little bit more to the east, and the other Samoa is a little bit to the west. I don't know how many miles they are apart. And for many years, they would keep their days the same as Australia. So it'll be a few hours before, but it would be the same as when it's Thursday in Australia, it's going to be Thursday in Samoa also. And about 15 years ago, American Samoa decided that they're going to follow American time. So therefore, whereas in the other Samoa it's going to be Thursday, in American Samoa it's going to be Wednesday, because they're connected with America and they following the timing of America. So here's the question: if someone happens to go, someone goes for a visit to Samoa and spending a Shabbos there, and do you follow? What do you do about Shabbos? Do you follow the local Saturday being Shabbos, or is it a day out? Which is obviously a difficult situation. So let's go back to the previous map. So this is at the back of the volume of Piskei Teshuvos, on the volume of Shabbos, Beis, whatever, on Siman Shin Dalet Mem. So the story is that there's a general view that the center of the world is Yerushalayim, and therefore it follows that the day should be like from spreading from Yerushalayim 90 degrees either way. That's one opinion. That was the opinion of the Chazon Ish. So he draws the line of the date line, la halacha, 90 degrees away from Yerushalayim. As you can see on the map, that cuts through a large part of Asia, cuts through Australia, but he took the policy decision. It's the middle of a landmass, so that whole landmass is going to be kind of drawn to the Eretz Yisrael, the one closer to Eretz Yisrael, and therefore, in the landmass of far east of Russia and majority of Australia, they are still drawn to the timing of Eretz Yisrael. But according to that view, New Zealand would have the times like America. Japan would have the times like America. And this came to a head during the Second World War, where there were the refugees who were in Kirby in Japan. And there was the question, how do they keep Yom Kippur this day or that day? The majority of the Rabbonim Eretz Yisrael paskin that they should follow local time, whereas the Chazon Ish told them to follow, it should be a day earlier. I don't remember the detail, but it was a different day, yeah, based upon this man in Eretz Yisrael. That's the opinion of Chazon Ish. And then we have the other opinion, which is 180 degrees from Shalim, because the international date line is 180 degrees from Greenwich, but Greenwich is about 35 degrees away from Shalim. So where should you, Greenwich has no bearing la halacha, and therefore they took the view of 180 degrees from Yerushalayim. Now, if you look on the map over here, that makes a problem that Hawaii is actually on the other side of the line. Instead of Hawaii being connected to America and keeping Shabbos the same time approximately as California, a couple of hours difference, okay, but instead Hawaii is on the other side, and therefore Shabbos should be when it's Friday over there. It should be Shabbos. They should have to observe Shabbos. The point, that's not what's observed in Hawaii, and they keep Shabbos when the same as America. But that wasn't the question here. Here was the question more about, and also this also has to be addressed. How can you have why is Hawaii not have to keep Shabbos on a different day? So let's take a look. So about 70 years ago, you have a brilliant Chacham in Yerushalayim called David Shapira, and he comes up with a very novel way of working out the date line, and that is based upon a medrash, which Seder Olam or something, which tells us exactly the time on Wednesday, what time of the day it was when Hashem placed the sun in position. And as a result, you can kind of work out from there 90 degrees to the east. That would be, well, kind of, he works out something on those lines. And he therefore manages to work out that the date line is 135 degrees from Shalim. 135 degrees from Shalim is 170 degrees from Greenwich. And happily, that makes all the difference that Hawaii is actually on the east side of the date line, and that Hawaii remains with America. So that is, as far as Hawaii is concerned, so they can, according to David Shapira, they're doing Shabbos at the right time. There's another cheshbon here, and that is that there are those who say that the cheshbon of Shabbos should be established by precedent. When the first Jewish people came there and kept Shabbos, even depends when it can be even over over the line. But if there were Yidden who came and were showing Shabbos there, that becomes the Shabbos over there. In other words, this is Menachem Kasher. He's taken the view. It's not an objective dateline mamish. It's based upon precedent. So these are two cheshbonos to justify how Hawaii is keeping Shabbos the way it is, like it is in America. And but the problem is going to be here with Samoa, where there's no kahila there as such, no precedent as such, and it certainly doesn't seem to be correct to say, oh, because 15 years ago American Samoa switched the date line, their days, therefore Shabbos is affected. So it does become quite a tricky question, and the good news about it is that there's very few Jews who need to go to Samoa to spend a Shabbos there. It seems to be a nice place, but it's a bit far. There's plenty of nice places closer by. But if someone would go there, there may be a cheshbon of them keeping 2 days Shabbos, avoiding doing at least one day keeping Shabbos, one day avoiding Melacha D'Oraisa. It is a complicated one. Okay, that's as much as I'm going to deal with that for the moment. Let's move on to the next question. So here, someone at the beginning of the week was asking me about hafroshas challah. So when it comes to hafroshas challah, there's a minimum amount of flour to be chayev b'challah. The shiur is, by the way, it's gematria of the word challah, which is gematria 43, and you can see in Shulchan Aruch, Siman Shin Chof Daled, the shiur is a volume of 43 eggs and 1/5 of an egg. This is based upon the Gemara, the volume of 43 eggs. Now, when teaching in class, I've asked the Talmidos, think of what's the volume of the food which you eat over a day. So imagine, let's say you have a 24-hour flight, and you have to take with kosher, you have to take with food. So how much food are you going to have? You've got to have a few slices of bread, let's say, and some fruit, whatever. The volume. Will it be the volume of 1 liter? Will it be the volume of 2 liters? How much food, on average, do you go through in a day? You have to don't start typing it. Don't worry. And the thing is, why is this relevant? Because the shiur challah is the shiur of the mon. Every person got mon, and that's a shiur challah, and that's the amount of mon each person had over a day, and that therefore makes me wonder about some very big machmirim who talk about 5 pounds of flour or something. How many people go through that kind of amount of food? I'm talking about not enough flour. I'm talking about, let's say, tomatoes and fish, whatever, maybe all your foods together. Go through 5 pounds of food, the volume of 5 pounds of food in a day. I think that's a mute. All right. Meanwhile, we have to translate this 43 eggs volume into contemporary measurements. Now, this is for sure that the shiur challah is a shiur in volume. It's not a shiur of weight. But it's easier for us to translate it into weight because it's more manageable to measure weight than to measure volume. So what we have here in the Siddur, the Tilas Hashem Siddur, the page before Birchas HaMosoin, has got a list of brochas, Shahakol and Hagofen and all the different Nitzias Yadai, whatever it may be, and it also has the brocha for Hafroshas Challah. And there it says, Halosh Isa, one who needs a dough, le'erech approximately, mishkal sholish litris, the weight of 3 liters of kemach hamayim by flour and water, chayv la'afresh mimenu chal. So this is what is written in the Siddur. Now, this is not from the Alter Rebbe. This is from the printer in Vilna in the year Tofresh Ayin Aleph, and this seems to have been the minhag in Russia. When it came, actually, I want to share with you, when it came about 20 years ago, when Kahos published the annotated Siddur, it says all the instructions, and I was asked to review those instructions, and I was very uncomfortable with this piece. And I'll tell you one glaring problem. What's the mayim got to do with it? The weight is got to do with, we're talking about flour. Why is it mixing in the water? Should be also part of the sholosh litros. But okay, Lepoil, and this is going, you see, it's a little bit controversial, and it was left like rather vague over there. You have a shiur, it doesn't say how much the shiur is. You get guidance on that. Now that is, but meanwhile we have here a shiur of sholosh litros. Reb Chaim Noah, by contrast, he comes along with a shiur of he comes along with a shiur of 1666, 1 kilo and 666 grams. How much is sholosh litros? You'll see in a moment. That's about 1,200 grams. So we've got a huge discrepancy between minhag, which is at least prevalent in Russia, of 1,200 grams, and Reb Chaim Noah's recommendation of 1,600 grams. Now, there's going to be the view and say, it's written in Til Hashem Siddur, published by Kahos, that must be good to go. So in Tov Shin Gimel, there's the publication of the Hayom Yom, and I'm sure some of our listeners have a luach which was published in English, Young Scholars Calendar or something. And in that Young Scholars Calendar, which was published in English, as I say, by Merkez Lenyonechin, on 25th of Sivan, it has an entry about the mitzvah of challah. And it says the weight of the flour being at least 1,600 grams or 3.5 pounds. So whereas in the Siddur it said 3 pounds, 3 litros, which is about 3 pounds, you'll see in a moment. In this Young Scholars Calendar published by Kahos, they're following the shiur of Reb Chaim Noah, which is around 1,600 grams. So there's a discrepancy right then. Okay. So the shiur of 3 liter. So here is from the Tzemach Tzedek in Yeredeya Simareish Chov Gimel, a whole tshuva about various measurements. And he says there that the shiur, Yodua the shiur chala erech gimel litres etzlein. What does Reb Chaim Noah do with this? Well, actually, he questions whether this is actually from the Tzemach Tzedek, although it's published in the volume of Tzemach Tzedek. The style is a little bit unusual. And also in that tshuva, there's a mention of my Rebbe, and it's unknown who that is referring to. So there is reason to doubt whether that tshuva is indeed from the Tzemach Tzedek. Okay, but so therefore he doesn't see that as binding, that Gimel Litra. Now, here is a sefer, a contemporary sefer, and that is where he writes the following. And let's explain a little bit what's going on here. 57, you can see on my sums on the side. An egg is 57.6 grams or milliliters. 43.2 times 57.6 is going to bring you to 2488, which basically is 2.5 liter. The thing is that the Rambam says that flour weighs 1/3 less than the same volume of water. So that's where he gets his, take 2.5 kilo, 2.5 liter, and take off 1/3. You take off 1/3, so you're going to be left with 1,666. So again, starting off with a volume of 2.5 liter, but in weight, that 2.5 liter, for the Americans don't know, so 2.5 liter would weigh 2.5 kilo. But that's in water. But 2.5 kilo of flour would weigh 1/3 less, and therefore you've got the shiur of 1,666. That's 2/3 of 2,500. That's where Reb Chaim Noah gets his shiur, based upon the Rambam, who says that flour weighs 2/3 volume per volume as water. But then, in the lower down he comments, that may be by intense packing the flour in. But B'mili Harogil, he says actually, the volume of flour will be half the weight of the same volume of water. And therefore, that's the background to the Russian minhag. He says, yeah, so he's talking about 1,200 grams. Well, 1,200 grams, 1,200 is approximately half of the 2.5 kilo which was the weight in water of water of the same volume. So that's what he's saying. That's where the background of the 3 punt Russia, and he quotes from Aruch HaShulchan that they would say 3 liter of flour. Well, that's what you just saw in the Siddur, which was printed in Vilna 110 years ago. Oilam Noyagin 3 pounds, and the Aruch HaShulchan and the Torah Tamim weren't so confident about this. Meanwhile, he tells you that the Russian pound, which is a litra, is 409 grams. And therefore, 3 times that is 1228. So it's about 1230. So that's where the lower shiur comes from. So bottom line, how do we deal with this? I don't have to say, because the Siddur mentions Sholosh Litros, therefore you can follow that. But at the same time, we've got the Hayom Yom in English, which follows Reb Chaim Noah. In Koibes Razash, there is someone's quoting Reb Zalman Shimon, who said that when 3 American pounds, which is a little bit more than 3 Russian pounds, you can make a bracha. So what's the bottom line? What I did say to the one who asked me this question, that the women who have been till now being particular with a shiur of 1666 should continue doing so. When it comes to the public challah bakes, where you want each woman to be able to make a bracha, but she has to be able to go home with a shiur challah. So then we'd go down to the minimum shiur of approximately 3 pounds or 1,200 grams approximately. That would be, if necessary, you could rely on that shiur, but the general Reb Chaim Noah's shiur of 1666 is certainly the more popularly followed shiur. And that's separately, you've got the shiur, the Litvische Welt are going Chazanish shiur, which is much more, as I said, 5 pounds or something, which is much more. Okay, that's a little bit of the discussion of but I found interesting to understand where these shiurim are coming from, and it's not because they are disputing the size of a revius or the size of an egg. It's just the question is the flour 2/3 of the weight of water, or is flour half the weight of water? And that makes all the difference in the shiur. Okay, someone asked me this morning, this is question number 8, and how are we doing for time? Okay, we've got another couple of minutes. Okay, that the Rebbe, I was as I often do, I was davening the Yomtov, not out of passion for davening the Yomtov, but out of passion that things should run on reasonably on time, and for the efficiency of the minyanim. At any rate, I davened the Yomtov, and someone pointed out that the Rebbe, when it came to Kedusha, when he was part of the congregation, he would lift himself. You know, you lift yourself on you lift your heels by Kedusha. The Rebbe would do that, but when he was Chazan, he would not do so. And so this is from what you have on the screen is from a volume which was published last year or 2 years ago called Halichus Menachem, which is recording the Rebbe's Hanhogas and adding explanation where possible. And so you have here wherever it says about lifting yourself for Kedusha, it says when the Chazan says Kodesh, so then the Tzibur kind of say also, and they lift themselves. So that's then, but then he says, but in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, it says Kodesh. It doesn't differentiate between the Chazan and the Tzibur. I just want to suggest that possibly if you're standing Shemona Esrei, you're Omed Lifnei HaMelech, you shouldn't be moving at all. So for the Tzibur who are not standing Shemona Esrei, okay, so they lift themselves when saying Kedusha. Whereas if you're the Chazan, so you're Omed Lifnei HaMelech, you've got no reason to move anywhere. So possibly the moving up and down is also a question of whether it's appropriate because you're Omed Lifnei HaMelech. Just a thought which I wanted to share. And then finally, the last thing which I have on my list is about going back to, if you remember, our whole discussion about the Lokshin and the fellow who had eaten bread and then had lokshen and forgot about having eaten bread, and said alamichya, and is a yotze for his by saying alamichya yotze for the bread, and so someone had pointed out to me a diuk that it's all very well the discussion if you when you said alamichya you had in mind that bread, but here he had forgotten about the bread, and in alamichya it's and not only in a bracha rishona but even a bracha achrona, it's relevant the kavona. It's important to have had kavona for which foods you're saying the bracha achrona, which for me was a big chiddush. And so someone this week was not impressed with the way I was so ready to accept that svara. He found it questionable. So I did a little bit more research, and just to rephrase the question, if I had some fruit and I had a drink of orange juice, and I made a bracha achrona on the orange juice, and I forgot to say a bracha achrona on the fruit, not shivas hamin, do I have to now say again ber nefoshes on the fruit? Because when I made the ber nefoshes on the drink, I wasn't thinking about the fruit. So this is addressed in detail by the Ben Ish Chai. The Ben Ish Chai published 4 volumes of tshuvas under the name Rav Peolim. And what his story was, that someone had what it was, but someone had had a drink and had had rice. And the person was under the impression that the bracha achrona for rice is al hamichya. And so now he made a ber nefoshes for the drink, and he was now saying al hamichya for the rice. And someone notices he's doing the wrong thing, and he thinks, should I interrupt him? Should not interrupt him? So he goes into detail. When the person said ber nefoshes for the drink, he didn't have in mind the rice because he was intending to make a al hamichya on the rice. In error, but that was he didn't have in mind. So he goes to this question: if you made a bracha achrona and you didn't have in mind a particular food, are you yotze or not? His end maskona, you can see it's on the screen, that you're not yotze, and it is imperative you have to, and you have. So, in the case of having had a drink and had fruit, and you forgot about one of the 2 foods, and you're only thinking of the other. And if you made a bracha achrona, you didn't have kavanah on the other food, then he says you would have to say bracha achrona again. So the svara which this younger man was mechadish, indeed has got good grounds in the Ben Ish Chai, and so I'm happy to go along with that. With this, I'm going to finish off for tonight. Wish you all good night, a good Shabbos, and Shabbos mevorchim, and Shabbos chazak, svaduyos peilos, and we should be zoche b'shuv Hashem as shivas tzion. And we should wake up, effen in the Eugen. We should effen in the Eugen and see the Geula Amitas Vashlem with Moshiach Tzidkenu. Mamish now.
Amen.